Today, I have a very special treat for you. We're going to be joined by a guest author. I'm going to be interviewing her and asking her questions that will help you on your journey as a writer. So I hope you enjoy it.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Monte channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Monte and I'm a women's fiction author. And today we have a very special guest, someone that I love very much, both as a writer and as a person. It's Caridad Pineiro. She's a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of over 50 novels and novellas. And just recently, in 2017, Caridad Ghost wrote Snow Falling, which was based on Jane the Virgin, which was a CW TV show, which was really good. And just recently, there was a movie based on South Beach Love, which is one of her latest novels, and it premiered on the Hallmark Channel, right? Hallmark Channel, yes, on October 9th. And that was also very good. It was a lot of fun to watch it. So welcome, Caridad. Thank you so much for being here and taking time out of your busy writing day.
Well, thank you, Julia. You know, I love you too. And I'm so happy to be here with you to talk about our favorite topic, which is writing.
Yeah. Okay, so I was trying to remember all the publishing houses that you worked with. So correct me if I'm wrong. So I got that you've written, let's see. Well, look, before we do that, you've written different genres too. So you've written Latino romances, which is how you started, right? Then you've written paranormal, contemporary women's fiction. Anything else?
I've been doing romantic suspense off and on for a number of years. I am doing a foray into more women's fiction next year with a very special book, The Family She Never Met. It's actually based on a lot of my family's real life experiences in Cuba and coming from Cuba. I'm trying to think of what else. I've done some military romance and things, but I really kind of put that under the contemporary romance umbrella, as well as some very spicy novels. When I was writing for Harlequin, they had asked me to do some erotic novels for Nocturne. So yeah, I've really had a gamut of all different kinds of writing. And the differences between the longer novels and the Harlequins and the novellas, really just challenging all the different lengths that you could really do as a writer.
Is that difficult to switch from genre to genre or different lengths? And I would think that would be difficult. I would have a hard time switching from,
Yeah. It really wasn't. I mean, I guess the first time I did it, it was after Encanto. We'd been doing those contemporary romances for about 2 years. And I think I had done about 9 books for them. And I just felt like I was almost getting a little stagnant in what I was writing, and I wanted to challenge it. And I was also in a very dark place emotionally. It was after 9/11, I'd had some work issues and I was just really feeling very dark. And I thought, as a writer, one of the things you do is kind of pour some of what you have inside of you onto the page. And so I suddenly found myself writing this very dark, edgy vampire suspense novel. And it was a challenge, to write that dark and, not necessarily have the cheeriness that you might have in your typical contemporary romance, but I just found it so intriguing. And it really was just a book that wrote itself. I think I wrote it in a little bit over a month.
Wow.
And, it took a couple of years to really sell it, because when I first started pitching it, I think it was around 2002 or something, just vampires were not the thing necessarily. It was just something that was, starting to take off with people like Christine Feehan and some of the others. And so it took me a couple of years to actually sell it. But then I found myself writing that and for about a decade. And since they were suspenses already, my publishers were like, well, how about straight suspense,
Yeah.
Because it really, in terms of the plot and everything else, there wasn't much difference. It was just taking away that paranormal edge. So I did that for a good decade, at least, or more.
Yeah.
Before I decided, you know what, I'm done being like dark and edgy. Or readers don't want to hear that, but I mean, I'm not necessarily done. There are a couple of things I do want to finish up in some of the series I was doing, but I just needed a change of pace and I needed to challenge myself again. And so it was writing, contemporary romance again and just writing something different, writing a series. And that's when I did the At the Shore series, which is set here, back here,
Yeah. Yeah.
on the Jersey Shore. It was a lot of fun to kind of create, a fictional town based on the towns that I love down in this area.
Right.
And that really just, it led from one thing to the other because in the midst of writing that, we got a call
Yeah.
from the showrunners for Jane the Virgin, um,
Yeah.
who were kind of like, well, we know you from, years back, and, we think you'd be perfect for writing this novel tie-in.
Yeah.
Which was very weird because it was a historical and I'd never written a historical in my life.
Right.
That was a challenge, because, I'd had little snippets here and there in the vampire books. In fact, I sent one of those snippets to them as a writing sample,
Yeah.
because they wanted to see whether I could even do historical. And based on that snippet, they hired me to do the novel. But it was weird because, we had to finish it in a very short period of time. It was, in fact, in a month.
Wow.
So it was a challenge writing that long in a month. But on
Yes.
top of that, so many things that we take for granted, like alarm clocks and snow globes and all of these things where, I'd be writing and at the same time I'd be doing research
Right. Yeah.
because, it was not my gig. And, Miami, when it was the Magic City and just getting founded by Tuttle and
Yeah.
Flagler and everybody, it took a lot of research.
Yeah.
So
Did you know
that was,
some of
I
the
think,
history?
I knew some of the history because, being Cuban, I went
Yeah.
to Miami,
Yeah.
often to see family, and friends. So I
Mhm.
knew a little bit about the history, but not enough to really give it the flavor that I needed for the
Right.
story. So I had to do a lot more history. And it's fascinating because Miami really was, even though Flagler and a lot of other people get credit, it was really Julia Tuttle who, you
Hmm.
know, um, convince these people to come down and make what is now known as the city of Miami, which is fascinating from a women's perspective, you
Yeah.
know. So that I think probably was the hardest one I had to write because not only was there the time constraint, but there was, doing something I'd never done before and
Right.
all the research involved to do it.
Right.
So that was fascinating. And then, I continued writing contemporary romance, but also got back into writing romantic suspense. And I'm back at Harlequin, which I love. I just did my 25th book for them,
Wow.
which I'm so happy about. And also, working with Hallmark, which was really a unique experience as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, so you mentioned that like at the beginning when you first started, well, when you were writing the romances, the Latino romances, and you were going towards the dark novels, was it hard to convince a publisher that you could switch from, basically just romance to something dark? And was it difficult also to carry your readers, because your readers get used to a certain style? And,
It was,
you know,
yeah, it was hard.
yeah,
It was really funny because I've had this happen multiple times in my life.
yeah,
When I went to this dark, everybody was kind of like, well, we know she can write novels because she's written, by that point, I had written 8 of them for
yeah,
Encanto. And they were like, but we don't know if you can carry off something like this.
right,
So I really had to have a full length novel for people. And I started shopping it around actually without an agent at that point.
mm,
And, it was really interesting because had a couple of people who said, oh, I just bought something like it, so
yeah,
I can't really buy it. But then the most unlikely person came up for it, which was Harlequin, because they didn't have any kind of paranormal line. And I remember sitting there and talking to the editor who I kept on saying to her, but you guys don't publish this kind of stuff.
yeah,
And she kept on saying, well, just send me the book, send me the book. And I did, because by that point I knew I had to write the entire book and prove to people that I could do something that dark.
right,
And they bought it. And I was so shocked because they didn't have anywhere to put it. They were putting a lot of books like that in what was then the Intimate Moments line, which was really, a line that was for mainstream-ish kinds of books that they couldn't put anywhere else. And so I was so happy with that.
Yeah.
So, and then they bought additional books in this series, and we just, kept it going. But then the funny thing is that we were trying to sell like a woman's fiction kind of book, which was the South Beach Chicas books that came out from Simon and Schuster. And everybody was saying, oh, but we know she can do this and this, but can she do that? So then I had to write a complete book again, to kind of convince them that I could do, women's fiction kind of book. And that one actually went to auction, and ended up at Simon and Schuster. So, that was a very happy occurrence. But it's just funny because every time I went to do something different, they said, but can you do this?
Right.
And,
Yeah.
as writers, we're writers, we kind of adapt and
Right.
grow. We see how the marketplace is, especially, if you want to be, a commercially published writer.
Right.
You really do have to watch from a business perspective. What is it that's out there? What are you doing? How does that fit in the marketplace? How can you, sell it into the marketplace? So, here it was, I had to do it multiple times. I'm happy to say now that people don't ask me that anymore.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, because,
Good.
yeah. So when I went back to contemporary romance, from the dark side, none of the publishers said, I need to see a whole book. They were more than happy to just, buy the book based on some chapters and the synopsis and everything, the way it usually works for traditional publishing.
Right.
So yeah, that was a good thing.
You've reached a level now where they're not going to question you, and yeah.
Yeah, well, they might. I mean, I guess if I suddenly decided to do sci-fi or something totally out of my wheelhouse, but not even, because I had done the Sin Hunter series, which a lot of people called, sci-fi romance, because they really didn't think it was suspense. They didn't think it was this. They didn't think it was that, and
Right.
it was a very different concept. But I'm hoping that unless I radically, go into poetry or microfiction or one of those other things.
Well, that's what I like about your writing, though. It just seems like you write what you want to write, and then you figure out like where it's going to fit, or you let your publisher. But it's uniquely you, because it doesn't matter what you're writing. I could read that. I could read your voice. I could read that into those books. So that's very good, and it's difficult to do, I think, especially if you're changing genres all the time.
Yeah, well, thank you. It is, and it is hard. I mean, I think you keep your voice, and I think that's the one thing. If readers like you and they like the way you write, I think some of them will follow you around. When I did go to the vampire books, I had readers who said to me, well, you know what, I don't normally do vampires, but I really like the way you write, so let me see what it's like. And so I did end up keeping them as readers.
Right.
And then when I went back to contemporaries, I had a lot of people who said, oh, I love your contemporaries. I'm so glad you're doing them again. And so it's kind of fun that they do kind of follow you around, even the guys. I mean, I had a lot of guys who read the vampire books because they had a little bit more action in them. And even some of them have followed me over to, some of the things that I wouldn't have normally have expected.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Wow. So do you recommend for a new writer to choose a genre, though? Because you probably don't want to jump around like that, right? After your first book and then write something different.
Yeah, I totally agree. I tell beginning writers that all the time, because I do see a lot of writers in some of my writing groups and everything that they'll start off doing a contemporary, and then they'll go do something sci-fi-ish, and they'll go do something else. And that's tough because you haven't really established yourself with a reader. Right. So you haven't really shown a reader what your brand is, what it is that you're going to bring to the table to them. Right. In terms of your style and your storytelling and everything. So I always recommend to, first-time authors that they focus on a genre that they like, not to change chase a trend. A lot of people
Right.
have a tendency, oh, this is what's selling, that's what I'm going to write.
Yeah.
And you could do that, but I think people see that the passion for the story isn't there. When you
Yeah.
really love a story, it just comes out on the pages. Like the last book of yours that I read, I could just see the love you had for
Yeah.
these characters and this story. And you can't fake that.
Right.
The readers see through it. And so I really think you got to love what you're writing and stick to one thing for at least a few books,
Yeah.
so that you can build that brand recognition of who you are as a writer.
Right. Right. I agree. I think if you're going to experiment, you want to do that before you publish that first book. Just kind of see where you fall and what you like and what interests you. And then once you've made your choice, stick with that for a little while. Because I don't think a lot of people can do really what you're doing. At least not for a while, like you're saying. Maybe after a few books, then yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think it does take a few books, and I think it takes a few books for you to find your voice,
Right.
really, and get comfortable, like a second skin, that this is how, you write, and, these are the things that you're comfortable with,
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure.
Okay. So you're kind of explaining that, but like, how do you think you've evolved them through all these changes and all these, as a writer, like how have you, going back to the Kensington days and then now, what has that evolution been like?
Wow, that's a good one. I think definitely I write a lot tighter now. In the old days, I kind of struggled with it. I would often write things out of sequence, and I never had any kind of outline or anything like that. And I think one of the things I've learned is, even if I only jot down 2 sentences about each chapter or each section, that it just makes it a lot easier to formulate the story. And I generally now write from beginning to end.
So now you do write some sort of outline.
Yeah, very loose.
Very loose. Okay.
Very, very loose. I mean, I don't even know you could call, sometimes only a sentence or two about each chapter. This is what happens. This is what happens. More so for the suspense books.
Okay.
Because really there's a thread, you've really got to do certain things to convince the reader about what's happening with the suspense. And you want to throw in red herrings, so you kind of, they can't guess it right away. I mean, for me, there's nothing I hate worse than guessing by the second chapter who did it and when and how. And so, you try to change that up.
Right.
On the contemporaries, I have a much looser kind of thought, arc about what's happening with the characters, but I definitely do that, and I never did it before. And I think one of the things is that now, I start the book, I may go over the first 2 or 3 chapters. I always tell beginning authors, that those chapters are like the foundation on a house, that cornerstone. And if that foundation is shaky, if you really don't know what the conflict is for each of the characters, if you don't really know what you want them to have accomplished at the end of their journey, it's really kind of hard to write the story.
Yeah.
So I will take a look at those first few chapters over and over to make sure that I've, kind of made that clear.
Right.
And then proceed from there. But I usually write straight through to the end, which I never did before. I'd always be kind of haphazard about it when I first started.
Yeah.
And I do have to say that working with editors, really helps, because they pick up on all kinds of things. And so, more and more your writing gets tighter, and now I think, I need editing, but it's really not the same kind of editing that I needed when I first started. Although I still have problems with conflict sometimes.
Well, that's actually a good point with the editors, because, now I'm doing self-publishing, but, this is after 20 years of working with different editors. And sometimes I wonder, if somebody goes straight into self-publishing, are they getting that, that feedback that sometimes we don't want to get from editors? We don't want them to say, well, no, you need to rewrite this, you need this, where is the conflict? Where is it? We don't like that, but it really does help us to learn, right? Because you learn anytime you're making mistakes. So like I do think that it does help to be traditionally published before you start self-publishing, because it does give you that background, you know, and you learn a lot about yourself. So
No, you do. And I think, people, I know there are a lot of people who self-publish who go through the effort of getting, all different kinds of editors. But I think people who maybe are just getting started don't realize that there are differences, like what a developmental editor will do versus, your copy editor and your line editor
right,
and all of those different things. And each one
right,
has a very specific role. Um, and so, I think it's problematic if you've not had that training or don't understand the differences.
right.
I've had people say to me, "Oh yeah, but this person reads a lot of books, so they're my editor." And I'm like, "But
Yeah.
how
No.
does that qualify them to be an editor?"
Right, right,
And a good editor is a gift to an author.
right.
When you think back to, the authors of old, even Hemingway or all these people, a lot of times it was because they had amazing editors who pulled
Yes.
out the
Yeah.
best of their talents.
Right.
And, I can honestly say, having worked with, a bunch of different editors, that there are some editors who just make my works shine. They
Right.
just know exactly what to do,
Yeah.
to polish it. And
I agree.
I really enjoy that process. I
Yeah.
didn't used to. Sometimes, you'd get that
Yeah. No,
dreaded
I didn't either.
the dreaded revision letter, and you'd be cursing and crying and you
Yeah.
know
It's like, what? She wants me to do what?
yeah, exactly. What?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so the publishers that you have worked with. Okay, so I have Kensington Harlequin, Source Books, Hallmark, Grand Central? Or maybe it was
Grand Central.
Grand Central, Simon and Schuster. So am I leaving somebody out?
St.
Pocket?
Martin's.
Pocket?
Well, Pocket was part of Grand Central.
Oh, okay, okay. Part of Grand
Oh
Central.
yeah, no wait, were they? Or maybe they were under Simon and Schuster
It's
at
so
one
confusing these
point.
days because
It's
they've joined
confusing.
so many different ones.
Yeah, St.
Um,
Martin's. We did. My first
oh, okay.
Chicas story was in an anthology with Berta Platas and Sofia Quintero
Oh, okay.
and
Yeah, I
Mary
think I have that. I
Castillo.
think I have that book.
Yeah, Friday Night Chicas.
Yeah, yeah.
St. Martin's. So really, I mean, I think at this point
So
I haven't
many.
written for Avon, mostly because they do other stuff, but
Yeah.
back when I was first submitting, they do a lot of historicals. And as I already admitted, not my thing
Oh,
at
I do.
all. No desire to do it my thing, although I am thinking about doing a book set during the Cuban Revolution. But yeah,
Yeah,
historicals are
yeah,
not my thing.
yeah. Well, after working with so many publishers and stuff, which one of these books, you know, the variety that you have, do you think resonated with readers the most?
Oh, that's a good question.
And maybe it depends on the type of reader too.
It depends on the type of reader. I mean, I have to say that when the first vampire book came out, it was really well received. And I think it was because it was a book that had a Latina protagonist who was an FBI agent. So there was that very strong hint of feminism, and you've got a strong heroine who isn't going to take any guff from anybody. There was that sensuality and everything of the vampires, and there weren't that many stories like that out. So it was different for
Yeah,
readers at that point. And then of course there was, the suspense elements too. So it was something that had, all of those different blends. And
yeah,
so, it was very well received. I think that's the reason why The Lost was so well received, which I did, I think, almost a decade after that.
yeah,
Again, you had that Latino culture in the story, which was different, but then you had this very unique concept. And that one was from Grand Central. And I think both of them have a lot of those similarities in common, that they were very different at the time they came out. They did feature these other strong, empowered women.
yeah,
There was that Latino aspect, and a lot of readers, you know, there's a lot of talk about accepting diversity and everything, but the reality of it was in 2004, I had readers saying, "Oh, it's so nice to have this different heroine," and I had the same reaction.
yeah,
which was probably way different than reaction we had in 1999 when,
Yes.
we launched Encanto.
Yes.
Which was like, we were like almost dead in the water before we ever got started.
Right.
So, I mean, I definitely think that readers and publishers, I mean, the Hallmark movie, South Beach Love, was not just Latino characters. Because I find that you see a lot of stories, you got a Latino character as a sidekick, or maybe they're the main person, but it's not really about the culture.
Right.
Which was the big difference with South Beach Love. It was entrenched in, Miami and that Cuban culture and the Quinces traditions and all these things that were different, in addition to the fact that you had these characters.
Yes.
So it's wonderful that after 20 some odd years, we're finally, having that happen.
Yeah. And I think that's what I did really, really enjoy about that book. It was all about the culture and the families, and why a quinceañera is even important to Latinos, and the interaction between them. Both we sat there with a bunch of my friends watching the movie who had also read your book. And we're like, wait, that was different in the book.
Very different. I sat there too. It was funny. I sat there too, and I had a neighbor over to watch with us, and she read the book, and she's like, "No, that was different." No, his name was different, and but the reality of it was, it still was a good movie that did highlight these aspects of our culture for other people. And as far as I could tell, it was well received from what I saw on social media. I think it finished number 21 for the night out of 100 cable programs.
That's
so
good.
That speaks to the power of the Hallmark Channel, but hopefully also the power of a story that's different.
Right. Yeah. And I like you said, I've noticed over the 25 years, the acceptance and the more mainstream, that Latino culture is not just way out here. It's part of American culture, which is what we really were looking for. I think when Kensington started, is not to be looked at as something different, or to be filed under Latino romances, but just romances that happen to have, one of the cultures that is American, right?
Yeah, it's true. And I'll be honest, in 04, I mean, I kind of tipped my hat off to Harlequin, because they never looked at that as a Latino book. They just thought, this is a good book.
Yeah.
And they put it in their lines, and they put multiple books with Latino characters that I did in their various lines. And they never made a point of like separating. And I hate to say it, because that's what was happening to us. We were being segregated from the mainstream, the way that many African American authors are or were being segregated from the general sections of the bookstores and stuff. And they never did that to me. So kudos to them for having that diversity well before many other people had it in there. So I'm excited. But you're right that I think it's much more accepting. My sister called me that day. Oh my God, McDonald's has guava and cream cheese pies. McDonald's, so our culture is kind of sneaking in everywhere.
Which is it's nice. It's nice.
It is. It definitely is. And it's about time.
Right. Yeah. 2021. Okay. So let's see. You've kind of answered some of my questions. Okay. Here's one that I think probably everybody asks you this because we all are amazed. But you're retired now, but almost all your books were written while you had a full-time job as an attorney, which is a very demanding, I imagine, profession. So what's your advice to writers who are writing part-time or on their spare time, and they have a full-time job or they have a full-time family, and they're trying to get that first book written while they have a job? It's like, how did you do it? And what's the best strategy to actually be able to write the book while working?
Yeah, well, I think you have to just, and I know it's hard to do, you just kind of have to find some time that you can eke out of each day. For me, believe it or not, I wrote most of my books on the train. You
Wow.
know, I had a laptop and I would get on the train. I had about a 45-minute commute into the city. So I would write for 45 minutes in, 45 minutes on the way home. And then on the weekends, because as you said, you know, you have family things, especially as women, you have
Yeah.
chores, you have errands, you know, you have the kids things on the weekends.
Right.
So I would get up at 6 o'clock, and right from 6 to about 9 before, you know, the family was up, and I had to go running around to do everything I had to do as a mom.
Right.
And that was basically, you know, how I carved off that time. But I was very religious about it. I did that every day, every
Yeah.
weekend. And I know it sounds tough, but I think, you know, I always tell people, you think you can't write a book in a year, but then I ask them, do you think you could write a page a day?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, of course. But a page a day is a book in a
Right.
year,
Right. That's
you
right.
know? So I'm not saying you have to do a page a day, but just set aside maybe 1 hour every week
Yeah.
and do 10 pages or two, well, an hour. I mean, that's a lot,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you know, 2 hours, whatever. And just find, you know, that little bit of time that you can when you can do it. I mean, I know you did it as well. I mean, you had
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
studies and your
I mean, I'm
job
really
and
still, I still do that because I'm still working, but but I do have a lot more time because my kids aren't here now, they're college students.
mhm.
But yeah, for years, exactly, the kids, the work. But I don't know, this is what I found. I don't know if you found that, but it sounds like it, that almost when you are overwhelmed, when you have so many other things, it forces you to say, okay, this is my time. I am going to take those 45 minutes on the train, and I'm not
Mhm.
going to waste those 45 minutes just sitting there. And where if you have just all kinds of times, like, well, I have time, I'm going, I'll get to writing
Yeah.
it later. You tend to waste more time when you don't have it. When you
No,
have
you
it.
do.
Yeah.
I mean, it was funny, but you know, having retired from my full-time job, it was a real, like, I had to really settle in and now develop a whole new schedule
Yeah.
because of the fact that I no longer had that commute. And, you know, so now I usually write for about 3 hours, 4 hours every day,
Hmm.
in the early morning because I'm still in that, you know, early morning kind of thing
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
all the years of working. And then I have a tendency at night to work on my blog or do
Hmm.
social media and things like that, because I can't really focus intently
Right.
on it. But you know, I still had to kind of reestablish a pattern and tell myself this is your work hours from
Right.
this time to this time, because otherwise I would just fritter them away. And
Right. Yeah.
I'll be honest, I ask myself now sometimes, how did you get everything done that you did before? Because sometimes I find myself struggling to get things
Yes.
done now when I supposedly have more time.
Right, right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So it's just being disciplined, whether you are working or not working. I think it's being disciplined and kind of reminding yourself. This is what I tell myself, and students. It's like you have to remind yourself why you're doing this. Like, why did you want to write to begin with?
Right.
And if you remember that, you will get up at 5 a.m. You will get up because it's like, this is important to me. I want to know if I can write a book. I want to have this book. I don't want to die with not having written the book. So I'm going to get up, that kind of
Yeah, no,
stuff.
it's true. It's, you know, it's
Yeah.
like everything else. It's like working out. It's like
Right. Yeah.
whatever it is, if it's
Right.
important enough to you,
Yeah.
you're going to find out a way to carve out that 45 minutes, that hour, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I have friends who tell me, you know, they take their laptops when they go to wait to pick up their kids,
Right.
and they'll sit in their car. And even if it's only 15, 20 minutes while they're waiting the kids to come out of school, that's when they write
Yeah.
because it's that important to them to do it. So I think
Yeah.
it's you setting that priority that this is something you have to do.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have do you just write in Word? Do you have a certain software or something that you like? Because I know some writers, I've watched, other people's videos, and they're like, no, I use this plotting software. And so since you don't really plot, do you just start writing, or do you use something help
It,
guide
it's funny when I go to do like that loose plot, I do it old school on a pad and a piece of paper.
you? Oh, wow. Okay.
Just kind of, yeah, literally old school, so I can add things and take things away and
Yeah.
everything. I will use OneNote. I use OneNote to like put the character descriptions,
Okay.
and then put the synopsis after I've done it.
Yeah.
Or like with Harlequin, I've been working on a lot of what they're calling ensemble series, where I'm doing things connected to other books that other authors are doing.
Okay.
So I do keep that in a place where I can easily refer to it.
Yeah.
And online was just the easiest way for me to do that and set that up. And I
Yeah.
actually, if I find a good article about something, I put it in OneNote, and
Yeah.
keep like a whole little reference area
Right. Right.
of
Keep it
things
all
there. But
organized.
yeah, but I'm old school. I write just in straight word.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know people love things like Scrivener and
Yeah.
Plotter and all of
Yeah.
those things, but I'm just comfortable doing it in Word. And, I don't feel like I've needed to do that, but I know people rave about them because they keep
Yeah.
their character descriptions in there. They keep
Mm.
their
Yeah.
plots and outlines in there and things like
Right.
that.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm like you. I use Word, and I haven't tried Scrivener, but I've tried like story structure. I've tried other things, and I feel like it's okay. It just tends to waste a lot of time putting that stuff
Yeah.
in there rather than just writing. But
Yeah, I find that too. I have a lot of, I know friends that, they used to do things on postcards, or I
right.
see, they will put things all over the walls and everything.
Mhm.
I think it's, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
My only concern with that is don't let all of that take away from you actually putting the words on the page.
Yes.
If you
Yes.
have limited time,
Yes.
all these other things shouldn't be, costing you more time
Right.
than you're doing your writing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I think a lot of times that is, the fear of actually starting to write. Well, let me prepare here. Let me make the sticky notes. Let me do all this. And it's like, okay, but get those on a page.
Yeah.
If you're taking all the time to do that and you're not actually writing, yeah, it's not getting you anywhere. So
Yeah. No, it's true.
yeah,
I almost wonder if it is like fear of writing.
yeah,
As long as you're preparing and doing all of these things,
right.
you're writing, but you're not really writing because there's nothing in your story ending up on the page.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so let's see. Is there what do you find most challenging, I guess, about writing and the publishing business?
Ah, so much. I think, honestly, I think it's a lot harder now than it was when we started.
You?
Yeah, I do. I do. When we first got
Yeah.
started, really, we only had traditional.
Hmm.
And if you didn't sell to them, you were kind of doomed, right?
Yeah.
And granted, this has opened up a wide range of possibilities for people who may have really good stories. They don't fit into a niche in any of the houses, and so it gives them an opportunity to get those stories out there. But the big dilemma is that there's just so many people doing that,
Right.
especially in the romance genre. And so, to rise above the babble of these thousands, if not 100,000s, if not millions of books
Right.
that are out there, especially the freebies and the 99 centers and all of this,
Yes.
that's a really difficult task. And so, when it comes to writing, you really got to figure out a way to get the word out about your book somehow.
Yeah.
And a lot of times for self-publishing, I mean, I was just at a conference where people were talking about spending thousands in promotion, thousands. And the problem is that if you're not getting those thousands from somebody and you have it in your pocket, it's coming out of your pocket
That's
with
right.
no guarantee as to
Yeah.
what's happening.
Right.
And so, somebody said to me, well, why did you go back to traditional? Because I did just self-publishing for about 3 or 4 years.
Oh, did you? Oh,
I did. I
I didn't know
did.
that.
And, my problem was that I was involved in a lot of projects. We actually made a New York Times list with one of the projects, the
Yeah.
USA Today with 3 or 4 other projects.
Yeah.
But it was just the sheer turnaround of how many projects, how close together, how much content. I was writing a novella like every other month.
Mm.
Um, and at one point, it had ceased being something I loved.
Right.
And for me, that was worse than anything else
Yeah.
because I write because I love to write. And I actually stopped writing for about 6 or 7 months
Mm.
because chasing that, having people remember who I was, chasing the money, chasing everything else had cost me the love of that one thing that was so important in my life.
Right.
And so after a lot of reflection, I decided, I'm going to go back to traditional for a whole bunch of reasons. And one of them was, it's nice to get a paycheck up front.
Yeah.
It's nice to have somebody say, I believe in this story enough that I'm putting money behind it, and I'm putting the editing behind it, and I'm putting the book cover and the design and everything else. And I loved working with the editors. Like I said, I think working with the editors really makes a lot of what I do so much better.
Yeah.
And so, that was important to me. So, but not everybody has those, that choice.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And even though I think today there's a lot of opportunities for new authors to get published, because I think there are a lot of publishers who are hungry for new voices and for people who they want to keep.
Right. Yeah.
So I always tell people, if you think you have a good story, don't immediately self-publish. See if you can sell it.
Right.
What's the harm in doing it that way? And I know there are people who are going to ream me and say, oh, but you only get paid so much on a dollar and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. That's fine. But that might be the best way for that person to write.
Right.
And that's the other thing. You've got to decide what the best way for you to write is, whether it's traditional or publishing. In my case, I'm doing hybrid because I'm still re-releasing a lot of things on my own with self-publishing. But for me, that was what I felt was the right way for me. Right. And so I don't off the bat discourage people from going back into traditional the way a lot of people do, because that might be the best way for that person to get noticed, to build a reputation, and to get ahead in their writing career. And it bothers me that a lot of people who say, yeah, but I'm making so much more money being indie published. But I look at their credentials, and a lot of them, it's because they had built a readership in traditional, and not everybody has that,
Exactly.
So I never tell people that one way or the other is right or wrong. I always tell them to explore both to see which is best for them.
Yeah. And that's good advice. I think that I don't think that I would have just jumped into self-publishing, because I did learn a lot from traditional publishing. I mean, just about the publishing industry as a whole, like you were saying, like the different type of editors, and how does a book actually get into a bookstore and all that. I didn't know any of that when I first started writing, and I learned that through the process of being traditionally published and seeing, well, what does the editor do, and how do the books get to the bookstore, and who are the distributors, and all of that. I didn't know any of that. So I think you either need to do a lot of homework as a self-published author and really learn all of that, or you need to, learn by trying to, sell your book to a traditional publisher first and seeing what happens with the whole process. It's very interesting.
No, for sure. And, I think, when you're doing the indie route, a lot of people don't realize that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a print book that's going to end up on a bookshelf at your local Barnes and Noble.
Right.
And people say, oh, some people don't care, but some people do.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, just a couple of years back, Nielsen was doing something at a conference, and they were talking about how people buy books, and surprisingly, a lot of people still browse the shelves for books.
Yeah. Right.
And so, you're missing a part of the market if your book isn't necessarily sitting in a bookstore somewhere.
Well, most likely it won't be if you are self-publishing. I mean, unless you are a big name author, it's probably not going to be on the shelf. It'll be online, it'll be at Barnes and Noble, it'll be on Amazon, but it's not going to be at the store because they only have so many, so much shelf space.
Right.
And so most likely it's not going to be. So it is. It's tough. It's a tough business, I think, no matter how you do it. But it's also a fun business,
It is.
Do you enjoy the marketing side of it? It seems like you do, but
I enjoy meeting people. I think that's the thing I enjoy the most. I am an introvert. People don't believe that when I tell them that. I am inherently shy.
Yes.
And it's taken me a lot to come out of that shell. But I love meeting people. I love meeting the readers. So, the marketing part of it, and, I guess the public relations part of it, to me, is something I really, really enjoy.
Yeah.
The rest, I love to design. So, I like doing like the graphics and all those little images and little
Okay.
video clips and stuff like that. I think if you're a creator, sometimes your creativity isn't limited to one thing.
Right, right.
But it certainly is a hard aspect of, learning how to do the different ads, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Amazon. I mean, there's so many ways that you could
So
just
much.
empty your pocket into into other people's pockets.
Yeah, yeah. Empty your pocket and your time, because all that time that you're
Yeah,
doing the marketing, you're not writing.
right.
So yeah, that's challenging. I honestly don't enjoy the marketing and promotion at all.
Yeah. No,
But
it's
but
a
it
tough
does,
gig.
you have to do it. You do.
You do have to do it. And, I find so many, and it's amazing that I actually have to convince people to do this. Authors who, well, I don't have a website. I use Facebook, or I don't have this. And I'm like, no, like, you need a website,
Yeah.
and, you need to build your content on there. And Facebook eventually is going to go the way of MySpace. I know we don't want to believe that, but it is. I mean, today, the news is all over the stock market, news about how they're worried about losing teen users. And, so all of these things change so much, but the one thing that won't change is your website and your newsletter list and all of these things
Right.
that you control.
Right.
And I just find it amazing that I have to convince people that, they need to have this so that somebody can find you.
Right.
And if you have content on your website, they'll stay there, they'll read it, they'll get to know you. And maybe when they get to know you and everything, they'll buy your book. And
Yeah.
and so I always tell people that should be your number one priority,
Yeah.
is
That's good
to
advice.
have to have a website that people can visit and find out about you.
Right. 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 Let's see. How do I want to take up too much of it? See how we're doing. Okay, we'll be wrapping up. So I've got, let's see.
Okay.
I do have one more question. Well, I actually have a couple more questions, but so I love your books, your dark books, your paranormal books, and I mean I love all of them, but some of them have these powers. So right, I
Oh,
want to know what your superpower is.
oh man. I don't know if I have superpower.
Writing a book in 1 month is a superpower. At least that one.
Yeah. I don't really know. I think it's wanting to share with people. Is that a superpower?
Yeah, wanting to share your stories and your.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm involved in a couple of nonprofits and things like that. I'm on the library board now. I'm a trustee of the library. So paying it forward is my superpower. There we go. I put on my superpower pose. Yeah. Yeah, no, I believe in paying it forward, because I had a lot of people in my very early career who did things for me and connected me with, with editors, and who taught me things, and that helped me get published. So I think that's the one thing that I truly believe in doing and getting ahead with, is paying it forward.
That's great.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great superpower. Okay. So you talked a little bit about the Cuban book that's coming up. So that's I don't know if that's your I'm sure it's not your only project that's coming up, but what are some of your projects, and can you tell me a little bit more about that novel?
That novel is titled The Family She Never Met. And for a lot of years, I wanted to write a book about, like, my mom was my mentor. She was my best friend. She was my mom.
Yeah.
But there was so much I didn't know about her that she kept tucked inside. And most of it had to do with Cuba. Everything that had happened in Cuba, that they did in Cuba. Some of the things that I remembered loosely, because, like, when I got here to the States, I was about 4.5, but we've been separated from my mom and dad for 2 years.
Wow.
Because they had to leave us behind.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of memories about, like, when we first got here, what was going on with my parents, the flow of family and friends through the house, and the things that they were wishing for and wanting, and all of these things that left really an indelible impact on me at, 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, because
Yeah.
it was, I think, formative years. I don't really
Right.
remember all that much from before. And I tried thousands of times and to write about that. And I actually found out a lot about my mom after she passed, because she didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so when my publisher said that they wanted, I hate to say this, a diverse book,
Yeah.
I didn't really know what to write about, because the reality of it is I don't think of my books that way.
Yeah.
I think of my books as books about women of all different cultures,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're Cuban. I've written a number of Mexicans, because I've been
Yeah.
to Mexico a gazillion times and have a lot of close Mexican friends. And so I don't think of my books that way. But then I had to really say, well, what is this going to be about? And I thought, well, you know, just start thinking. And for the first time, I thought, well, what about a story about somebody who knows nothing about their culture? Because at one time I had grown very distant from it. I mean, I married an American, and
Yeah.
I don't know, you did too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you marry Americans and you move away from an ethnic enclave. I'm not in an ethnic enclave like Miami. And so little by little, that culture disappears. So I thought, well, why don't we start with that concept?
Yeah.
This is a woman who knows nothing about her culture and has never been connected to it. And then from there, the story just literally exploded.
Yeah.
Um, and so it really became about a young woman who has a grandmother who has been estranged from her mother. She's never met her. Her mother rarely mentions the grandmother, rarely mentions Cuba. And so when a man comes into her life and says, your grandmother wants to meet you before it's time, and he
Yeah.
implies that it's before she dies, obviously,
Yeah.
um, she feels compelled to go for a number of reasons. Number one, because she wants to meet this woman she's never met. And number two, because she sees the pain that this woman and Cuba have indelibly etched on her mother,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I saw
She goes
growing
to
up.
Cuba.
No, she goes to Miami,
Oh, to
obviously,
Miami.
because
Okay.
most of us can't go back to
Yeah.
Cuba for a variety of reasons,
Yeah.
including how not just the U.S. government, but how hard the Cuban
Oh,
government
yeah.
makes it.
Yeah.
And so she goes to Miami to meet the grandmother and find out what it is that has so touched her mother's life that she can't even talk about it.
Yeah.
And so I incorporated a lot of my family's stories leaving Cuba here. That pain, every time I saw my mother's pain,
Yeah.
when she saw a broadcast, like I remember,
Yeah.
her watching the Pan Am games and seeing this broadcast and crying, and saying, oh,
Uh,
we used to live right near here.
uh,
This is where, the
yeah.
house was just a block from here or 2 blocks from here or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's what led to it finally, because for so many years I tried to write that story and I couldn't, but making it a fictional character,
Right.
experiencing it made it possible. And so, I think it's a really powerful story about women overcoming that pain, about women coming together,
Mm-hmm.
and the importance of family and your history.
Yeah.
So I hope it'll resonate with people.
Sounds great. It really does. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to reading it.
Well, thank you. Well, I'll make sure to send you a copy as soon as I get one.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds great.
Yeah.
And then what's, something that interests me about Cubans, we talk about the American dream and immigrants coming for the American dream, but it seems very different for Cubans because it's more of fleeing something rather than going to, like, my family, my parents, my dad came for the American dream, and he was middle class in Argentina. He would have been fine over there, but it was still this idea of the United States, and I don't know if that's the same for Cubans. It's not like they left because they wanted to leave and they were searching for something else.
Right.
So
It isn't. And it's funny, I've read a number of books and I do bring that issue in the book that
mhm.
for a lot of Cubans, coming here was an exile.
Yeah.
They left thinking they would go back because most of them who came in the early 60s really had better lives in Cuba.
Yes. Right.
They were teachers, they were professors. My mother was in law school, and
Yeah.
had to leave when they shut down the university. My father's family owned a store.
Yeah.
So they owned homes. They were middle class,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so for many of them, they were fleeing this dictator,
Yeah.
and what was happening. And that's why, like, I go crazy. I see people wearing a Che Guevara shirt, and he was a
Yeah.
he was a murderer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were busy, they were firing squads. And my parents had a choice. When they left with days notice, because the
Yeah.
choice was, stay in Cuba and either go to prison or be killed or leave.
Yeah.
And there was only one place my parents could think to come, and that was the United States,
Yeah.
because there's no country like this.
Right. Right.
And that's why your parents came here,
Yeah.
because say what you will, there's no country like this.
Right.
If you want to succeed here, you can succeed here, no matter how difficult it is.
Right.
But that was the experience of many, many Cubans. They were here in exile, thinking one day they could go back. And obviously, here we
Yeah.
are 60
Not
years
yet. Not
later.
yet.
Yeah, not yet. And who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
who knows what's going on in Cuba? We're not hearing, the internet's shut down. I mean, who knows?
Sure. Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but for us, it's definitely something. And the book touches upon that,
That's good.
that feeling that there was an exile, and that
Right.
you know people wanted to go back. But it also touches upon the way I feel, and a way a lot of people feel, that this is our country now.
Yeah.
Cuba is where we were born. We have that connection to it, but I have no desire to go back and make that my country
Yeah.
again. This is
Yeah.
where I'm an American.
Or you were a
Uh,
baby, so yeah, of
yeah,
course.
no, I was a baby, and as much as that influenced me
Yeah.
when I was little, during those early years, and everything that came after, my parents and what they taught us, and my grandparents, who for them it was a wonderland.
Right.
Again, this is my country now, and while I have some interest in going to see it, there's no
Yeah.
real desire to go back there and stay.
Right.
At
Right.
least for me. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think maybe for the first generation, I think they would have wanted to go back, but after that, right, this is your country, and this is where you've made your life and your children and all of that. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Well, Cuddy, this has been so wonderful. I really appreciate and
Oh,
enjoyed
my
having
pleasure.
you. Where can viewers go and find you, find your books, find your website, all of that?
Yeah. Well, they can find my website at caridad.com. That's caridad.com. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I'm all over the place. They can track me down. And I want to thank you. This has been absolutely so much fun and so many great questions.
Oh,
I
thank
really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I'll post your website and all of that in the description section, so that it'll be easy for viewers to find it. But
Wonderful.
thank you, and enjoy your day out on the beach. I'm jealous. I wish I could go. It's rainy here in California today. So
Oh, I've heard you're having horrible rain. Yeah,
we're
I'm
gonna have
I'm
storm.
sneaking this in because we're supposed to get that rain for the next week. So
Oh, good, good. Enjoy
yeah.
it. Enjoy it.
All right. You too. And thanks again.
You're welcome.